Well, Andy, it was a lot of fun having you as the co-host today on our episode with Shane Sowden.
Yes, thanks for having me on. But Shane, our new co-host, really opened up with us about his personal life, personal experiences, his growth as a coach after being an athlete for so many years, a high-performing baseball pitcher. A lot of wisdom to offer, which makes our podcast so much stronger.
I'd agree, and I've known Shane for a long time, and so I'm excited for our listeners to get to know who Shane is a little bit more, because I believe there's a lot of coaches and a lot of fathers that can relate to Shane and Shane's story. The terminology I took away is things are caught, not taught, and just that leading by example, even as a father in our home and with our children, but then also as a coach. The growth mindset that he talked about today, the growth mindset that he showed us in the interview, just the challenges, the burnout, the frustrations, the mistakes he's made, the apologies he's given. He's leading a top 5 national program right now, but it's a process and he's lived that.
I really enjoyed that specific element too, Justin, where he shared with us some of the mistakes he's made as a coach and the actual apologies he's had to follow up with to his athletes in his earlier days, and then the growth he's experienced since those mistakes. Very humble guy who is open about never being perfect, but always wanting to pursue excellence.
Welcome back to the Grit and Growth Podcast. With me today is our producer, Andy Hamilton, as today's guest co-host of this episode, as we get the opportunity to interview Shane Sowden, Season 2's co-host with me and men's basketball coach at Briarcrest College. Shane, I'm excited to have you on the podcast again, but this time as our guest, as we can really dive deep into who you are, the culture you've built at Briarcrest, how you coach, your philosophy, and how you lead others. Welcome into this seat of the podcast today.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Changing seats today, and looking forward to see what questions you guys mustered up.
Well, speaking of changing seats, I'm excited also to have Andy. He's been our producer and the mastermind behind a lot that we do here at the Grit and Growth Show. And so to have you, Andy, as a co-host today, I'm thrilled I might just step aside and let you kind of lead a lot of these questions.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, in front of the camera. Good to have a voice here. Shane, tell us about a bit about your personal life, your family life, and maybe a bit about the thread you've gone through since finishing school and taking on a professional role.
Yeah, Amanda and I have been married for 21 years. We'll be married 22 years this June. And our oldest son, Caleb's in grade 12. Mac is in grade 10, and Hudson is in 8th grade here in Cairnport. And so that's the family unit right there. And as far as, I've been coaching since January 2003 was when I got my start. I got a phone call. I graduated from a school in Missouri in the fall of 2002 and got an email, about 2 weeks before I was graduating. And a former teacher knew I was coming back to Moose Jaw and basically sent me an email and said, hey, we need some help with some coaching at a school called Riverview Collegiate in Moose Jaw. And I started as the assistant when I came back for Christmas break. And within 2 weeks, the head coach just stopped showing up to practice, and I got my first head coaching gig. And so, a little bit of trial by fire right there, trying to figure out, I've been playing baseball for 5 years and got thrown into like you said, like another hot seat right there. Just had to figure it out on the go. And so and from there on, that's where it started. And so I've been coaching basketball since 2003, mixed in with ton of baseball coaching, volleyball for 3 years, track and field. I think that's it. Almost badminton, but that never happened, thank goodness. And 6 years ago, opened up our own baseball training facility. So my main gig is head coach of the Briarcrest men's basketball team, and then got a personal business, baseball training, baseball academy in Moose Jaw. Been doing that for the last 6 years. And that's been a lot of fun seeing that grow and seeing the fruit of that in the community of Moose Jaw and surrounding area.
Shane, you talked about you were a college baseball player in NCAA and as a pitcher. I know you even had an opportunity to pitch for Team Canada as a junior. But it's fascinating that you come back and yes, you do coach baseball, some of the minor leagues. I think you sit on some of the board of directors in the Moose Jaw minor baseball, or have in the past, and have a baseball training facility. But here you are as a basketball coach. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you might have been a multi-sport athlete, more than two.
Yeah, in high school it was volleyball in the fall, basketball in the winter, and baseball in the summer. And then when the weather was nice, you're playing everything. You play basketball during the day, do baseball practice. Baseball practice at night, whatever it was. We didn't have cell phones back then, so it was a lot of riding our bikes or driving around Moose Jaw, finding pickup games, playing rounders on the fields, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are my three main sports. And then coming out of high school, had a few options to continue playing collegiately, basketball and baseball. And at that time, I was 18. In my mind, I was going to take the offer that was going to offer me the most scholarship at the highest level. And I ended up getting a scholarship offer to a school by the name of Northwestern State University in Louisiana. It's a mid-major Division I baseball program, and went for it. I had just come off spending the entire summer playing for Team Canada, bronze medal at the World Championships, great experience there. And I thought that was my best, quite honestly, I thought it was my best chance to eventually get paid to play a sport. I had a few offers for university and college for basketball, but I knew I'd be playing 4 years and I'd be done. Whereas baseball, I saw a path to possibly being able to getting paid to play a game. And so I took that. So that was my journey there. Ended up staying 3 years in 3 years in Louisiana, and then transferred to a Division II school in Missouri. It was called Central Missouri State, now called University of Central Missouri. And they are a Division II powerhouse. And, we could get into that journey a little bit later, but the first year was injured, didn't play very much. Second year got mildly healthy, had a better year, and then had a really good year of summer ball after that, and had a couple opportunities for some pro tryouts, and just decided I would be done because it was enough in my mind that I was given the opportunity, but I knew I wasn't, going to play baseball for $600-700 a month somewhere wasn't really going to pay the bills. So that's when I decided just to focus on teaching and coaching.
Well, and you were already a head coach of the Riverview boys basketball program, so you landed a head coaching gig at that point too.
Yeah, that was, and man, even just thinking about that brings back so many memories of just trying to figure out. I had no clue what I was doing, and it was basically, and that was quite honestly my first time thinking through is like, okay, well, how do you actually run a team? Because what happened was I came in at Christmas. The team wasn't very good. Let's be honest. We got killed all year. And we had 13 players when I arrived. And once the head coach just stopped showing up, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm doing this now. And we started putting in expectations and standards. Okay, like everybody needs, if you want to play, you got to come to practice. You need to be on time for practice. This is how you interact with, you need to go to class. If you don't go to class, you're not going to play. You're not going to participate. Like just, the first experience of trying to set standards for a group of young men and calling them up higher, trying to get them to understand they're worth more, they can achieve more. And within, I think, 3 weeks of starting to do that process, we were down from 13 players to 6 because 7 guys quit. They didn't want to be held to a higher standard. And so we finished out the last 2 months with 6 players. And I run into some of those guys now. One of them is a local referee, and he was my point guard. So that was back in 2003. So again, 21 years later. And as we sometimes talk about that, and we were the most in shape team, I think, in the province because we had 1 sub. And it was just like, there was no complaints about playing time. We won our last game of the year, we won a few games, but we ended the year on a high. We beat a team that was quite a bit stronger than us, but we got better and we stuck together and grew through a lot of adversity, and it was a lot of fun. So learned a lot that year. And then from there on, spent 3 seasons coaching there, and then got my first full-time teaching job out in Cairnport.
Shane, you obviously the transition from being an athlete to a coach, there's something we can see there for a lot of coaches. You talked about teaching, but was there other elements of your life you feel like led you to coaching ultimately, other aspects of your life?
Probably like a lot of guys my age. I remember my dad asking me when I was in grade 11, just out of the blue, he said, "Hey, like, do you have a plan? Like, do you know what you want to do with your life?" And I just kind of thought about it for a second. Then I said, "Well, I think I'm going to either be a teacher or a pastor." And he just kind of looked at me. It's like, "Okay, that's fine." And then, just we never talked about it again. And then as I went into my senior year in high school, it was looking more and more like I'm probably going to go the teaching route, because I was pretty set on going down to the States for baseball at that time. And yeah, but I think probably like most of my guys my age who got into teaching, 20, 25 years ago, the reason why we wanted to do it is because we had a great experience somewhere along the line in high school. We had some coaches that impacted us deeply. So I was like, man, if I can get paid to teach phys ed all day and build my own basketball program or whatever sport it is, I'm going to jump at it. And so I think most guys would say, like, yeah, that was their experience. It's like they saw they had a teacher or a coach that they wanted to emulate them. And so that was me. I'd never, I think for a lot of teachers, the teaching part is secondary, but the chance to build a program and lead a group of young men or a group of young women and impact them that way was a main motivator for a lot of teachers back in the day. And so that's how I got my start. So when I got involved, when I got my first teaching job, I just coached everything. It was like, okay, what needs to be done? And you just jumped in and you volunteered for everything. And it was just common. You teach till 3:30 and then you're in the gym or on the field, helping kids in their sport.
Listening to some of your journey and learning how to coach, I know there's a longer story in there, Shane, and we probably won't get all of it out today, but I mean, you went from high school basketball coach to, I think inside of that journey, there was a stint where you were coaching the women's college basketball team as well. So you had the opportunity to coach both male and female, and to be where you're currently coaching a men's college basketball program. You're coaching at Briarcrest College. It's about 500 students or so. It's a small private college in Canada in the middle of nowhere. I assume that the funding is maybe not as good as some of the other big colleges across the CCAA in Canada. And yet, you're sitting here today leading a group of young men as a top 5 ranked national program. And I know that that's probably turning some eyes. It's probably giving some emails and some questions about what you're doing. And what is it that makes Briarcrest Clipper men's basketball, what is it that makes it different?
This could be a whole podcast episode in itself. And yeah, just to give a little bit of context, and I think to see where we've gotten to today in the last, this is year 7 for me with the men's program. So just a little background, starting in 2003, coached for 3 seasons at Riverview Collegiate Basketball, came to Cairnport High School, was the athletic director and boys senior basketball coach of varsity for 2 seasons. Halfway through the second year, the athletic director in the college. We had a really good year that year and noticed, and our women's program in the college was in a bad spot, put it that way. And I was 28 years old, and I have this college AD asking, "Hey, do you want this next year?" And I was like, "What? What are you talking?" I'd never thought of being a college coach. That wasn't even on my radar. And so being young and I guess, ambitious, and I've always liked the challenge of trying to rebuild something. Something's broken, something needs to be fixed. How do you reset that? By resetting a culture, bringing in players. I've always thought I'm always, on board for hearing those type of stories, those documentaries. Those are the teams I cheer for. And so I said yes to that, did that for 4 years. Started that journey when I said yes to that job. It was just Amanda and I. We had no kids, and at the end of 4 seasons coaching the women's program, we had 3 kids. So some drastic changes in 4 years there. And, quite honestly, I burnt out. And there's reasons for that. And so after 4 years, I had been teaching in the high school while coaching in the college, because back then it wasn't considered a full-time job. And then spent 3 years coaching volleyball and junior basketball in the high school. And then became a vice principal and coached varsity basketball for 4 years. And then had the opportunity. Then I just felt like I wanted a new challenge. And so jumped into coaching, applied for the men's job in the college and got it. And so this is year 7. And so looking back over that journey, it was just a lot of figuring out who I am as a coach. What are my values? What are my standards? And why am I doing this? And trying to just build around that and trying to create a program that's different. So I see a lot of, especially at our level, and I even see it at the high school level, is a lot of young men are being used by the game of basketball for a coach or a school to achieve something. And so I wanted to flip that on its head and use the game of basketball to build into young men as the number one thing. And so we all want to win. We're competitive, hate losing. Like, it sucks. I stress over it. I wake up, like this morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. I'm thinking of post-Christmas practice in 2 days, like that kind of stuff. And so that's always there. But something I've learned is that even with the success, even with the wins, even with the championships, the medals, whatever it is, the awards, those things are pretty empty if you're not striving for something bigger. And it's one thing to say that, it's one thing to do it. And there's been times where I've said, oh, that's what I'm doing. And I don't really think I was. I was lying to myself. And so here we've tried to create a culture where the guys know they matter regardless of the results on the scoreboard. Yes, we're going to have challenges with playing time and guys trying to fit into roles that they necessarily don't want. But like when they come into our program, we just settled it on this about 2 years ago. JP Nurbin from Thrive On Challenge pushed me for probably a good 5 years. I worked with him as he was my mentor for 6 years. And he was just like, well, what are your values? What are your values? Like, what's the vision of the program? It's like, I don't know. I couldn't come up with something. And I was getting kind of frustrated with him. Like, just shut up and stop talking about this. And about two years ago, he connected with me with a coach by the name of Greg Tonigal down at Indiana Wesleyan University. And so Greg was gracious enough to jump on a Zoom call with me for about 2 hours 2 summers ago. And he just shared with me his path, and he's a very successful coach down there. But his goal was never the winning. His goal was developing young men. And so after a long conversation with him, something just kind of clicked in my mind where, okay, Briarcrest men's basketball exists in order to build up young men, to build men of character, who are going to be equipped to be committed husbands and engaged fathers in light of eternity. And something for the first time in my entire coaching career that just said, yes, okay, that's the bigger vision. That's what we're trying to be here. Because I think one of the biggest challenges within our culture in the world is men who are absent, whether that's in their marriages, their relationships, or just absentee fathers, whether they're not in the picture anymore or they're there, but they're not there. And I'm a firm believer that if men stepped up more and took responsibility, a lot of the societal issues we see in society would end. And so that became our bigger vision, pushing forward. And by no means are we perfect. We're trying to figure it out and trying to be intentional about that. And so one way we started being intentional about that 2 years ago was we started an annual father-son retreat. And so at the end of our training camp in August every year, we invite all the dads of all the players for a 3-day retreat. We rent out a camp site about 2 hours from here, and we take away everybody's phones for 2 days. Not the dads, we let them be adults. And we just do 2 days of just being together, a bunch of team building stuff. We eat together. We do a camp project together. We swim. we do team building stuff. Like, it's just a time of just getting away and getting together, and then inviting the fathers into that. And so for some of our guys who don't have their dads being able to attend, they almost get like surrogate dads for the season. They meet other guys' dads. I bring in, like, my father comes, our associate AD comes, just other guys who are on campus, like bringing them in to make it like this is a family, and just trying to make it really clear to the guys that we exist because we want you to become who you are becoming is more important than the wins and losses. But when we emphasize that, what we've started to find the last 2 years is that message is becoming more and more attractive to guys, and more players are coming to Briarcrest and sticking around for 5 years, finishing a program. And what we found with that is having that commitment from players, having them strive for something higher. The results on the scoreboard are changing. And so last year we went 14-7. It was our second best ever record in ACAC history for Briarcrest in I think 28 years or something like that. And we carried that on to this year. We had 15 returners, which is, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but people are shocked when they tell you had 15 guys come back. And I was like, yeah, we had 15 guys come back. Anyway, so we're 8-1 this year. It's been a great first half of the season. And yeah, ranked number 5 nationally. And so it's a little surreal right now. It's, because when you get in like to this whole idea of transformational coaching, a lot of people question you. They're like, oh, it's not going to work, or that's just all whatever. Because they're looking for results. And so
That's a question I had, Shane, right there is there's a lot of coaches and parents and athletes who fear that when you transcend the X's and O's of coaching and get into culture building and transformational coaching, that's in conflict with creating a team that's going to win games, be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be an expert to speak about how they actually coexist and feed each other rather than be in competition with each other.
I believe in excellence. And, I teach at a Christian institution. The faith I have in God and who he calls us to be, I don't think he calls us to be mediocre. And so with that, but I also don't think we're called to look at the outcomes. We're called to just like, are you growing and being the best you can be every day? And if you're striving for that, guess what? There's going to be times we fail, but there's grace for that. And I think in our culture, too many times there's not a lot of grace. We're afraid of failure, and when we're afraid of failure, that's when we start lying, or trying to be somebody else, or not, or cheating. And so trying to create an environment where it's like, hey, we're going to call you up to your highest self. Like, can you be the best you every single day? Knowing very well that that's impossible it's an impossible thing to achieve. But if we focus on who we're becoming every day, okay, what kind of teammate were you in practice? Did you work your hardest in the weight room, in the classroom? Are you showing up on time? Are you sitting in the front row in class? Are you shaking your prof's hands? Are you turning stuff in time? Are you taking responsibility for your actions? So these are the things we look for. We celebrate, serving your teammates. From day one, our seniors are serving our freshmen. Team meals, our freshmen go first. For the first few months, our seniors are the ones carrying the bags, cleaning the locker room, doing the laundry, going last. I don't even have to set that example anymore. They just do it. Because we're now inviting freshmen in, and they're like surprised at first, like, well, don't you guys get to go? No. We're flipping, like, we're servants. So it's just the little things we emphasize from day to day, and what you celebrate eventually become habit, and then that forms your culture. And it's a slow burn. It doesn't just happen overnight. It takes years of intentionality. But I've never seen somebody just flip it on its head in 6 months to a year. For me, it's been 1, 2, 3. A few years ago, started seeing it turn a little bit to the part where now it's just ingrained. This is who we are. This is what we do, and we're always looking for ways to get better. How can we serve better? How can we, but I think the two totally go together. And wouldn't you rather win and have success or win a championship or whatever it is, make playoffs, doing it the right way? I know a lot of people who have won and then just be like, well, that sucked because we didn't become better humans. And it's empty. But if you do it the right way, it means more. And also, like, what's your level? Like, what's your measurement of success?
Yep.
I tell the guys every year, I will know I was a successful coach when I come visit you in 20 years and I see how you're leading your family, you're in your community, in your workplace. That's how I'll know how well of a job I did modeling for you and stressing those types of values. And then maybe they're coaches and they're coaching the same way, that sort of stuff. And so that's how we measure success. And if along the way we can win some medals and all those things and have national rankings, that's just icing on the cake. Like it's awesome. But I think all that has been very intentional getting to this point.
Lots of thoughts, Shane. I really appreciate the breakdown and answer that question and just where you're at. And I think the key that you've said a few times in that is that this is year 7 for you in being intentional to build this culture. And at the same time, for 5 years, you really struggled to maybe be intentional to actually set that vision, that purpose that you talk about now, your values as a program. And it sounds like, Greg Tonengal had a great impact on that to help with it. But I think that's just the progress and development that you've experienced. And you'd asked the question just about this, and you even said this idea of transformational coaching. And it seems like it's a place that just bad teams go to just to kind of have fun, but not actually win championships that way. But 21 years ago, when you took over Riverview and you decided to be intentional and say, listen, if we're going to play sports, we're going to show up at class. We're going to be on time for practice. We're going to do this, and you'll be able to play. And these are some basic standards. And I think even though maybe 21 years ago you didn't really know that implementation of those are the basics, right? Those are the pure basics of building your building blocks for your team. And it wasn't easy. 7 of your kids quit because of it, and you had 6 left. And so I just really, I want to kind of get rid of that myth of this idea of transformational coaching is for the weak. But actually, transformational coaching you talked about excellence. It has really high standards. And at the same time, it holds really high relationships. And I think you mentioned grace. Now, I at times get a little bit more inside. You and I are co-hosts. We get a chance to talk at times about different things. So I know that even in a year where you're 8-1, where you're currently ranked top 5 or number 5 in the nation, but you've been as high as number 3 at times. It hasn't been all roses. It's still transformational coaching. It still requires intentionality in player meetings and grace and opportunities for young men to be young men, make mistakes, own those mistakes, take responsibility, show up with their teammates, and get back to work and jump back into what they signed up for. We don't need you to tell us stories in particular or anything, but I think it's important that our viewers understand or our listeners understand that it's not all roses, that when you're intentional and you want to build a championship culture, you have to be intentional about every little detail.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I have two stories I can tell. And so as far as being a coach, and I get paid for it, but I think being a coach is possibly one of the most difficult, but also most rewarding professions. Whether you're a volunteer coach or you're getting paid for it, it is hard, especially in our culture now. And so, two examples to think, like, even from this year, yes, I would put our culture up against any program out there. And I know there's other programs that have stronger cultures than us. And, you never arrive. You're always trying to get better. Can your culture grow? Can you live out your values more? Can you be making an impact on these young men, becoming selfless, all those sorts of things? It never stops. But like, when you have that culture set, it actually helps. Like, so when guys go on, under the line or get out of the team circle or don't meet the team standards, it's actually easier to bring them back in. So we had a couple of I would say minor things that could have become bigger issues that the guys knew they had made a mistake. There was no yelling. There was no screaming. There was no demeaning or shaming. It was like, all right, guys, you guys know the standard. You set some of the standards. You didn't meet them. And so, we had to have some of our more stronger players had to sit out a couple games earlier in the year because of some bad choices. Well, they talked to the team. The team embraced them. They sat out. They were great teammates, great leaders on the bench. A few other guys had to step up, created some opportunities for everybody else. Did it suck to have to go through it? 100%, but it made us stronger. And so there was no going over it or talking about it or making guys feel bad. It was just like, all right, guys, you guys, it was a growth opportunity for them. And for the whole entire team, like all our young guys got to see, oh, wow, these standards actually mean something. And it could have cost us. But the standard and this excellence and the fact that we care about who these guys are becoming and we're going to hold them to those standards, that's actually more important than our standings, right? Because nobody else is going to see if we won or lost because of that. They're just going to see the win or loss. But I think it's more important. Like if you're going to set those standards, you got to set to them or stick to them. The second thing is probably my biggest switch was in 2016. I was coaching the senior boys at Carenport. I just taken over the senior team again, and we were in practice, and we had, for the first time in years, that team had expectations. I was taking over. We had a nice group of grade 10s with some veterans mixed in. We were going to be competitive for the first time in a few years, and we're in one of our first practices 2 weeks into the season, and it's one of the worst practices I've ever seen. We can't catch a pass. We can't do a layup. Anyways, the long story short, I lost it. I went mental, slammed the ball hit the roof. I started screaming how bad practice was, how bad, anyways, I blew it. I went nuts because I had these unreal expectations for this team. And my identity was so wrapped up in, we might have a good team, we can make provincials, all this kind of stuff. And I lost my lid. And even as I'm telling this story, my two assistant coaches had no clue how to react. They just kind of looked down at the ground and were kind of walking around like, oh crap. I tried to recover. We kept practicing. The practice got worse. I just shut down practice. 20 minutes later, I said, okay, everybody just go home. Anyways, as soon as I walked in the front door of my house, my wife saw me. She's like, what happened? You should just tell my body language. Something was wrong. And my response was, I have to change. I can't do this. I'm going to have a heart attack if I stay on this path of worrying so much about, I was worried more about winning games and what people thought of me than the kids I was coaching. So I was using them. I said I was transformation, but I wasn't. And so that took off a major shift. And so the next day we held a team meeting, and I said to the boys, I apologize, first of all, for the day before. And it was pretty funny because I had a good relationship with these guys. So anyways, it wasn't a proud moment for me. But then the next day to have this meeting, and I still remember the classroom. I still remember the setting. I was like, hey, I'm never going to yell at you guys again. I said, I'm done. I'm going to hold you. I'm going to hold you to a standard. Here's the standard. And if you don't meet the standard, you're just going to sit. That's it. And we're going to get on this path. Long story short, we started doing all some team building stuff. We did book studies together, all this kind of stuff. But in that meeting, as soon as I said that, a few of them started laughing. They didn't believe me. And I was just like, what's so? I'm like, I'm serious. They're like, okay, coach, again, because, this is 10 years ago. But yeah, they didn't believe me. And so I was like, okay, wow. Challenge taken. And through that, for the next 2, I stuck to my word, and we got a little bit better every year. And I remember 2 years later, one of my players, and we had a really good year. We made it to provincials, all that kind of stuff. And so I got to grow with this group of 10th graders up to the time they were in grade 12. And I'm sitting in my office, and one of them just pops his head in and said, "Hey, by the way, remember that meeting you had 2 years ago? It's like, none of us believed you. We thought you were full of crap. But you did it. And we changed and we believed, and it took 2 years, but we're all bought in now." And it got to the point where we had this group of high school students after 2 years. I could call a timeout in a game. And for about the last 6 weeks of that last season, timeout, coach, we got this. And they'd do the timeout themselves because they knew exactly what I was going to talk about. Right. Because it wasn't so much X's and O's. It was how they were behaving on the court together, and they were able to right the ship themselves and this group of 17, 18-year-olds. So that was a big aha moment for me. And again, it takes time. And I find most coaches, when they try to make the switch to like a more transformational focus, they give up too soon. Because again, it's just little by little. And I've never seen it work quicker than fully 2 years. But it works. And once you get there, if you're willing to fight through that, it's worth it. Like, I can't stress it enough. It's worth it.
I mean, we could follow up on this for half an hour, right? And we could talk about what's Shane mentioned almost burning out. So we could go that direction, but I know there's other things we want to talk about too. And I do think one piece would be important for anyone on this is to be like, well, where do I start? I think this is really cool. I'd love to have a culture like that. What would it look like? How do I stop yelling? Where do I start?
There's so many things there, right? And so I think they go together. So you start, well, where do you start? Because like if you don't start somewhere, you're going to burn out. And I'm seeing more and more coaches burn out or quit this. And quite honestly, like, what other profession do you have where you're going to have a bigger influence on the next generation? I don't know one. Like, it's pretty unique. So where do you start? So, if you're listening to this, like, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom, almost a couple times. And so I've always cared about my players. Like, I've never not, but I think we can fool ourselves into thinking it's all about them when it's not. And I think so much, like, that self-reflection, looking within. And so finally, after that moment, I did a lot of self-reflection after coaching the girls and resigning there. Like, that was humbling, because I felt like a failure. And then 4 years later, I'm in the same gym with a different team, screaming and losing my mind because we can't make a layup or catch a pass. And I was like, okay, there has to be something more than this. This has to be bigger, because like, I used to love this, and now it's like causing me stress and anxiety that I don't need. And being willing to do the internal work and take a step back and just ask yourself, one, why am I doing this? And like, that's you got to sit there with a pen, a paper, whatever it is, your computer, and you just sit and you think, it's like, there has to be something bigger than this. And be like, how can I be? And then for me, it was, I'm a reader. I love reading books. I always have a book on the go. I got a master's degree in leadership. I knew all this stuff. It's one thing to know it in theory. It's another to live it. And so it was like taking everything I'd learned in my studies and all the books that I did, podcasts, and be like, am I actually doing this? Am I actually trying to do this, or am I being a fake? And so sitting back and then making a commitment to change. And so it's figuring out who you are and being comfortable in your own skin. That was probably one of the hardest things. Again, that was something that, JP again played a big role. Is like, you gotta be you. But here's the thing: who are you? You ask that to most men, they don't know what to say, right? Most humans, like, how many people have done the deep work to be like, hey, who are you? What are your own values? What do you live by every day? And so, we talked about the whole vision for our program, but I had to get down, okay, what makes me tick every day? What gives me energy? Okay. So like my 4 values, and again, this has taken years to come to grips with, was it's curiosity, honesty, commitment, and faith. Those are the 4 things when I wake up in the morning. I'm like, okay. And then, so how do I live those 4 things out every day now with my family and my players and the people I come into contact with? And am I a 10 out of 10 every day on those? No. But at least I know that's who I'm supposed to be. And how do I operate in those areas daily? And so if I feel myself getting out of that, I can tell, you can feel it. But yeah, it's doing the deep work, and quite honestly, understanding you need the change and being willing to say, I'm sorry, or will you forgive me, and just be better the next day. Because we need that modeled. And I just find we're so scared to say, okay, I was wrong, or I could have been better there. Well, who hasn't? So I think, yeah, the deep work starts with you. Are you willing to actually set aside time, whether it's 10 or 20 minutes a day, to work on you? Most people don't want to listen to a podcast or journal or read a book they're like, I'm too busy. Well, no, you're not. It's just an excuse. You want to be a better dad. You want to be a better husband. You want to be a better coach. Just take a step back and get intentional, because it makes all the difference. But that's the most scary part, is just admitting we don't have it all together.
I think you mentioned a couple times too, just the burnout that you experienced with the college program when you first were coaching at the girls team. I think you talked about good coaches that we're seeing quit all the time, and there's a lot of focus on mental health and mental wellness and these conversations today. As I hear, coach practitioners and people like the JP Nurbin that you mentioned that worked with you, and they talk about this, it's really about advocacy and support even for those coaches, so that they can become self-aware, that when they have these triggering moments or different pieces, that oftentimes they experience burnout because they don't have healthy habits in their own life. They're not spending time on themselves. They're not spending time in other relationships that matter. They're too focused on the 4 a.m. wake up and you're thinking about practice in 2 days, right? But I think, in your family setting, Shane, first off, it sounds you've talked about this often about your wife, Amanda, and the support that she provides for you, your ability to talk things over, probably her ability to hold you accountable to the times where you're not living up to those 4 values that you shared with us. But also other, a JP Nurbin and someone in your life that's helped you. And so when I think of a young coach that's starting in their career, or they're just at a spot, they're like, first off, I between the 3 of us, we don't know any coaches that don't say they like to win, right? We just, it's like the old, was it Herm Edwards, the old YouTube video of like, you play to win the game. That's why you play the game. You don't just play to play it. And so as a coach, we recognize that we play to win the game. So there's not really any coach that would say that they, don't want to be successful or don't want to win games. And I think all I'm trying to say is that if a coach were listening today and going, how do I start? I think you identified it. It's actually not a change in their practice. It's probably not a team meeting right away. It's not anything other than sitting down with a pen and paper and going, why do I do this first off? And sit there longer, fill up your coffee cup if you're still not done, until you can write something down, something that you can share and that you believe in.
Well, and understand, why do you coach? What's it feel like? Probably the big thing for me was that Joe Ehrman book and Inside Out Coaching and his 4 questions. And the second was like, what does it feel like to be coached by me? That one hurt. Like, trying to figure out why you coach. Okay, great. That's all philosophical and great. Give you purpose, which is great. But then it's like, wow, what kind of experience am I creating for my players? Right. And that was tough. So I was like, man, I think some of these players are actually scared of me. That's not good. Right. And yeah, so just to switch there, that sort of thing. Like you just, and we've all been there. Like maybe a hockey coach, remember that time you broke your stick in practice, or, slammed the glass? Or for me, it was like, coach, remember when you punched that locker at a high school tournament or whatever? I'm like, yeah, that's kind of embarrassing. That's what you remember. Anyways, like, it's just little things like that. But to do but to do the inner work. And then, like, again, to be a little bit selfish too as a coach, like to be healthy. Like the whole mental health, like, okay, like go for a walk, lift some weights, read 10 pages a day, get a nap in if you have to, go to bed at the same time. You got to watch what you're putting into your body. Like what kind of food are you eating? You know, if you're hyped up on caffeine, you know, or self-medicating with whatever it is, alcohol or food or whatever it is, you know, you're running from something that you don't have to. And so learn to take care of yourself, understanding what those triggers are. And then I say this to like this, I wish I had this when I started. Find a mentor, pay money for it. Like if you don't have somebody if you don't have a mentor coach in your life that's just willing to do it, pay somebody, hire somebody. There's some good ones out there. For me, it was JP. Like I'll be forever indebted to him, you know, getting to meet him and form a relationship when he was just getting started. Yeah. Like, I think, I don't know, there's some sort of statistic out there. Again, it was in my studies where like people who hire a coach for whatever it is, whether it's like a health, like a gym coach or whatever, always return, like the ROI is massive because you put money down on it and you invest in yourself. So like to have a mentor coach and just be open to that, I think is massive.
Shane, you definitely have a growth mindset. You talk about lifelong learning, having a mentor. Where do you go for inspiration today? And what is inspiration for you? What keeps you inspired and energized and motivated to do your work and be a father and a husband?
Oh man, energized, and there's also a little bit of it's scary because I already mentioned that I think that one of the best ways to change the world is to build into young men. I think we have a man crisis. None of us are perfect. We can all be better, but I feel like if more men were engaged, taking care of themselves, loving their wives and their partners better, and being engaged in their families, I think the world would be a better place. Doesn't matter what country, religion, whatever you're at, I think the world would be a better place if we had more men spending more time on those things than their phone or video games or whatever. And so it's scary because I've got 3 young boys. I got 3 teenagers at home and they're young men. And I'm like, man, these guys, in many ways, I'm like, these boys are a reflection of me. And how am I doing? So I've got a scorecard almost right in front of me daily, which is freaky, but also inspiring. And I've learned that my boys, things are more caught than taught. They see how I spend my time, what I'm doing, what I'm reading, what I'm watching, what I'm eating, all that kind of stuff. And if they're watching, they're observing, and I can very easily tell which things are rubbing off for good and for bad. And I'm like, dang, I got to change here. Like there's that. And then the fact that I have 19 young men between the ages of 18 to 24 that I'm in charge of leading and trying to develop a culture. And like when I say like curiosity is one of my personal core values of being curious every day, of growing, asking questions. Am I like, how are my players doing? Like in classes, off the court, like on the, like who, like what excites them? Like trying to be curious about my players, being curious, like, hey, can we grow this little program, this little school of 400 when we're beating schools that are 20,000 large? Like being curious, like, can this be done? And being excited about that challenge. And then, the core value of just being honest. Okay. I don't need to yell or scream. Just be honest. You're not meeting the standard. I don't need to demean you or shame you. Just tell, like, hey, you're not meeting the standard right now. Go take a seat. when you're ready to meet the standard, we'll think we'll get you back in. Right. Like I think sometimes that's way harder when somebody calmly just sits you down like that, than yelling and screaming. And then I think sometimes in the coaching realm, we yell and scream at a player, especially if they're a talented player, because then we think we've disciplined, but we don't have to take them off the floor. But we're actually enabling whatever action still. And so I think we think that we're disciplining. We think we're making a difference. We think we're making an example, but we're actually not changing the behavior or the attitude. Or if you can sit down over there and be like, okay, until this, so being honest, being committed. I'm committed to my wife, even though it's hard sometimes. I'm committed to being a dad, and I'm committed to my players. And for them to know that, it's like, hey, like, we're going to figure this out when it gets hard. We're going to stay committed. Is like, okay, let's figure this out as a team. And I'll own it. Like, hey guys, we lost a game this year. I didn't think I was at my best, right? My players had to own some things, but like, I had to walk and be like, hey guys, I didn't prepare us well enough, and I'm going to figure out how to be better next week. Right. Instead of like pointing fingers at them, that sort of thing. And then my faith, like every morning it's Bible open, praying, trusting in God, and be like, hey God, like, this is your team. I can't do this on my own. Help me to just be the best version of me today. And I'm trusting you with everything. It's like, these guys are yours. The team is yours. My recruiting list is yours. Fundraising is yours. I'm going to try and do my best with this. Just use me, give me wisdom and discernment in whatever comes my way today. And then that just gives me like quite honestly, the courage to then engage and understanding it's just not me. There's a bigger purpose there. And so yeah, that's what gives me that energy.
Shane, I think appreciate just your heart, your honesty, the ability to come on the podcast today, not as the co-host, but as our guest in that seat, and just to share your 4 values and to live them out as you answered each one of these questions here today. I think our listeners will be honored to hear your story, but also hear the story about the small town Bible college team that's turning a lot of heads across the nation right now, and playing in a transformational coach team setting, but a setting that focuses on the development of young men and who they're going to become for the future and for our communities that we get to serve in. So appreciate you and your heart and your ability to come on and share that and tell a bit of your story at the same time.
No, and it's been fun. And if there's one thing I can, say to people that are spent the time listening to this is like, we can listen to these podcasts, we can listen to this podcast and think, oh, they have it all figured out, all this kind of stuff. My goodness. It's being clear of like where we're trying to go is just part of the battle, but then just being willing to engage every day. And like, I make mistakes every day, not perfect. And, but being willing to, show yourself grace. And then again, like that, the cliche, trust the process, but just keep showing up every day. We used to have too many people that just quit every day, and it's such a worthwhile endeavor. Just keep showing up, do your best, and see what happens. And just we need more coaches that are just to build resilience and stay committed to it, because we gotta, like, youth sports is massive, and we need great examples out there. And there's just less and less coaches, for whatever reason, being willing to do it. So yeah, we need more transformational coaches in this area.
Yes. Excellent. Thanks, Shane, for being so open with us about your thoughts and feelings and experiences, and we appreciate it. It's great to get to know you a bit better.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Grit and Growth podcast. We hope that you enjoyed today's guest and the answers that they were able to give and the stories they were able to tell. If you did enjoy today's episode, we'd ask that you would just follow or subscribe to our podcast. It does help us get the word out in our message. Thanks again. Have a great day.